Thank you so much for everyone who came today. I'm excited. This is my first, how many first timers here? Yeah. Okay, good, great. So you're joining me and everyone else. Most people are. I've heard so much about the festival, and to be here today, I'm sure Kyle and Marcus feel the same way. It's just such an honor. So big data, biomechanics, and new science behind personalized training. I just spent some time talking with Kyle and Marcus about how we wanted to approach this, and we're just going to make it pretty much a conversation, just what we've been able to learn. I work for ESPN, I'm a sports anchor, but over the years at working in sports, I've seen so many different injuries, I've seen so many different athletes in terms of how they elevate and how they excel, and those who don't excel, and there is a science behind it, and it's becoming more and more integral in what we do in sports. It's not just the way you handle a body, and we all have bodies. Many of you here, how many played sports in some capacity in high school and college? Oh, this is great. And how many of you consider yourselves athletes now as adults? You run, you exercise, good. This is gonna be great for you too, because there's so much science there, and someone may have a nagging hip ache or a knee or an ankle injury, something that you wanna kind of conquer. And to learn more about the science behind how your body works is going to really help you in the future. And hopefully we're able to break down some of that information for you today. I'm a big believer in having whomever I interview or moderate with introduce themselves, because I always forget something. And I hate when I do that. And they always can say who they are in such a better, more concise way. So we'll start with Kyle Korver, huge fan. Can you tell everyone here who you are? But I'm sure they know, but it would be nice.
Yeah, my name is Kyle Korver. Just finished my 16th year in the NBA, so going for 17 next
That's
year.
That's impressive, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where I go with this. I got a wife and 3 kids.
Who do you play for? What do you do?
I got traded a couple days ago. I'm currently with the Grizzlies. I'm not sure how that's going to play out all the way. Yeah, but
prior to that, you were
prior to that, I was with the Jazz. I drafted by Philadelphia. Had a couple stints with Utah, Chicago, Cleveland.
Yeah.
Met some Cleveland people here.
I'm just making sure we have the fans in the audience, right?
Yeah. So, it's been a good chunk of my life playing basketball and trying to learn about my body and not get hurt and prolong this career.
Yeah, well, Kyle is what we like to call a journeyman, who's an excellent journeyman, who's done so well. And it's hard to be in this league 1 year, let alone going on your 17th year. Can you imagine what it takes physically to keep yourself in such a competitive game what's the average age of a kid coming out of college, 19, 20? Yeah. And you got to bang with those bodies, Kyle. How do you do that?
I'm trying to keep up with these kids, right? But it's a really good job.
It's a great job.
I'm trying to keep it.
Yeah, amen. Yeah. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Marcus Elliott, please introduce yourself, kind sir.
Yeah, so my name's Marcus Elliott, and I've listened to Cleveland fans too. You guys, it doesn't look good going forward, you know. These are the dark days ahead, I'm afraid. But I hope I'm wrong. Since I was a kid, I had this interest in studying the human body. I told my dad that I was going to study the body and then apply it in sports when I was still in high school. And I subscribed to a couple of our physiology journals. Right on the other side of wanting to be a cowboy or an astronaut or one of these things, I decided this is what I want to do. And it turns out it's been a really, really interesting career. And I've pretty much had to make up the educational track because there wasn't a track to be a sports scientist. It wasn't really a career when I was training. But I trained in physiology and biomechanics and then in medicine and then sports medicine out of Harvard. And the whole time while I was training, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And that's get inside sports, understand the athletes more, be a lot more precise in how we care for them, prevent injuries, have them interact with more technology, use more data, and that's really our calling card in sport.
Okay, so Marcus has a facility in Santa Barbara, and for the last decade or so, maybe a little more than a decade, Kyle, you've gone there during the off season. You were introduced to P3. Can you tell the audience how you were introduced to P3, the facility in which Marcus runs, and how you work with Marcus, and what you've been able to do, and how it's helped your body?
Yeah. So I the first time I was with the Jazz had an agreement with Marcus and P3 where we would go to P3, you would get assessed at the beginning and at the end of each off season. And I think at some point we're going to show a video to give you a little more insight on what that looks like exactly. But like most of you, like I grew up, no one really shows you how to run. No one shows you how to jump. But you get into sports and you start working really hard at something. And you run and you jump a lot. And if you run and you jump the wrong way, eventually at some point you get hurt. You start to get aches, you start to get pains. I do believe, like our bodies, like they want to work the right way. And they want to not hurt. And they even want to heal themselves. But sometimes we don't really know how our body works. But we're all so different from each other. And I think growing up, when you grow up in high school and college, there'd be a whiteboard when you walk into the gym, and it'll have 3 sets of 10 military press, hamstring curls, and do some abs at the end or something. Like that's the kind of training I got for a lot of years to really kind of take care of my body. So fast forward a whole bunch of years, you go through college, I get into the MBA. When I come to Marcus the first time, I got this really bad knee pain. Like I think I'm probably almost done, to be honest with you. Got some feet things. I got an elbow issue, and I don't really know how to fix it. All I know how to do is work really hard. And so, like whatever my coach would give me at the time, I would do it with all that I had, but it was just creating more and more pain. I didn't know how to work smart at that time. And so I got to P3, and one of the things they do is they really break down this map of your body. And you see, okay, my knee hurts, but it's not because my knee's bad. It's because it's my big toe or it's my hip. Or they're able to track exactly why you're hurting the way you are. And then not just show you where your pattern is wrong, but help you develop a new one. Because that's really important. You can't just know what's wrong and then fix it. You have to develop a whole new pattern in your body. And that takes time. And that takes people who know what they're talking about really sitting in on each one of your reps, each one of your sets, each one of your workouts. And so I got to P3, and I felt a good bit of relief within like a week or two. But I didn't have that new pattern yet. So that was like 12 or 13 years ago. And I've had some injuries the past bunch of years, but I can say this is probably about the healthiest I've been.
Wow.
I've evaded the big knee injury or the Achilles or the kind of those big ones that can really derail your career. And so it's been a lot of good work. And I really, really believe in it.
Okay, so I love that he gave that story and that background. And again, remember, he's going on 17 years in the league. We're going to show a video now for you to see a representation of what happens when he goes to be assessed at P3. And I think they're ready to show that in the back for us. Right? He's not hanging out in the corner, waiting for the 3. So sometimes you do. Sometimes. Marcus, tell us a little bit more about what, in fact, when Kyle came to you, he talked about his issue, but what you were able to do and how you've been able to work with him over this decade or more.
Okay, so most of what we do is study movement. And movement is what sport is, right? Sport's about movement. And in a lot of ways, movement feels like life. You guys all, whether you get paid to play sports or you played in college, you played in high school, or you just use your body to carry you to poetry readings. You need to be able to move, and we just haven't studied movement very much, and so that's where we put all of our juice, is in understanding movement. Originally, we did things like EEG studies of brains, and we used a whole lot of technology when we first started this. The objective was to use any technology that would give us some insight into an athlete, so that we could care for him with more precision. But where we end up focusing almost all of our energy is in studying movement. How do athletes move? How does the body move? And how does it correlate with injury risk? How does it correlate with performance advantages? And so we have a big engineering team that takes all this data that people like Kyle allow us to extract on him. And each time we assess an athlete, we get incrementally smarter. And in this league, in the NBA, over half the players come through P3. And we set up programs for them. So these are big data sets. And one of the things that's difficult about studying movement is still really time intensive. To get this type of granular detail that we want, it takes some 16 hours of data processing after we assess an athlete. So it's really skilled labor intensive. And so there aren't these big data sets on human movement. These are the first ones that have existed. And it just so happens that we have them on some of the best athletes in the world. So it's an amazing path that we're on right now. And for me, it couldn't be more exciting for me. Kyle is an exceptional worker. He's one of these guys that wants to do anything he can to get better. He is always trying to do the right thing certainly with respect to his sport, but also in his life. And so he's been a great partner in this venture. But we just identified some things that were wrong in his mechanics when he came in. It turned out that on one foot, he would land kind of passive. He was too loose with his foot, so his foot was really relaxed when it hit the ground. And because of that, it creates these big eversion forces, a lot of rotation, and that got translated up into the knee. So he had knee problems. And generally what we do, we sit down with an athlete, even the most jaded athletes, like a Carmelo Anthony, you'd think he might not be that interested, right? But you sit down with them, and you look at all their data, and you say, look, this looks great, but we're worried about this thing.
Yeah.
And what happens is it resonates with the athlete. The athlete will say, oh, that thing has been giving me trouble. And so, you got to tell me more. So we're really lucky that way. Like the athlete's intuitive sense of their body tends to almost always align with the things that we see from data. And so it's a way of taking our data world into their feel world. Athletes are usually they're not A plus B equals C. They're just like, let me feel it. They're more artists, generally, certainly in the NBA. But it's a way to connect with them, to take this engineering world and bring it into their world. And we're really lucky for that, And so that's a lot of relationships are built from that. Mm-hmm. And so we just see that Kyle's got this big eversion forces on his left ankle, translated through his knee. He has chronic knee issues. We'll work on changing how he interacts with the ground, making his hip more stable, the knee stops hurting. You guys all have bodies, and at some point this information is going to get to you. It's just that your bodies aren't valued as much as his is, and so we can put a lot of resources into it right now.
Does anyone get paid millions here No. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, yes, go.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, but at some point we need to make the jump, and there's a bunch of computer vision there's 3 or 4 groups that are doing really interesting things with computer vision right now that I think are going to democratize this, so that you can get the same type of assessment, and you get done and you find out your left hip is really unstable, and instead of waiting to wear out your left knee and not be able to play tennis when you're 45, you do something about it when you're 25.
Marcus, I think a lot of us, especially if we're active, know if we do something, our bodies tell us we can't do that anymore. We don't necessarily know why. I feel that way if I'm, whatever, it's yoga, it's running, it's biking, all the cycling things, whatever I may do, I feel that. I'm like, okay, so let me take some time off. But if this is what I find interesting, you guys. I'm talking to Marcus, and he's saying there's a science here that is recently being tapped into that wasn't even around when you were in high school, but you felt the need to develop it, and you had a passion for it. And as of late, I don't know, you can tell me, the last 15, 20 years, it became something more in demand in professional sports. And I was curious as to why, because it makes sense if you listen to him talk about the mechanics of what you're doing with your body aren't right. So that's the reason why you may have an injury. And if we know what the mechanics that we're doing incorrectly can prevent injury, why aren't we doing it? Why isn't there more science developed toward that? And if you could talk to me a little bit about that.
So about us or in sport, in elite sport?
In sport, yeah.
So I mean, it's, you guys, you see the bleeding edge stuff of professional sports, and you think these guys are handled with the most precision. But I'm just going to tell you, it's not like that. Like Kyle's talking about the whiteboard with a workout for every player on the team. I mean, this still happens in elite sport, on NBA teams and NFL teams. They still oftentimes treat these guys as if each one is the same. And what one guy needs might be exactly the opposite of what this guy needs. And it's just going to take him out in the weeds. So somehow, when sports became big business, 20 years ago, NBA players had part-time jobs in the off season. It was not big business. Despite sports becoming giant business, somehow this development of athletes, injury prevention, the development of athletes got left behind. There was this amazing amount of slack in the system. And as I was going through my training, I worked at the Olympic Training Center too. I saw Phil was here from Olympic areas. Yeah, Olympic athletes tend to be cared for better than these pro athletes, believe it or not. There's more precision around them, and the athletes are more engaged in their development too. So I just knew there was a whole lot of slack in professional sports, and at some point that slack would come out. And so we just started working really hard in the space, and fortunately, it's coming out really fast right now. Everything has changed. Almost all these, in the NBA, pretty much every team is using the technologies that we'd innovated 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They're still figuring out what to do with it, but they're all buying it, and they're hiring sports scientists, and it's only happened in the last 5 years. I mean, it's really happening quickly.
Crazy.
In his sport, the second guy off the bench might be guaranteed $80 million. Guaranteed money. They pay. We don't the NBA Finals. We'll save that maybe, but
Yeah,
But I mean, these guys are paid a whole lot of money to go play their sport, and you should do a lot more to ensure this investment you made in these players. Of course, they're humans too, and you want to have good outcomes there. But just as a business, they should be much better, and the owners are realizing that. So now they're investing in the space. So the slack's coming out really really quickly, at least in basketball.
Well, Marcus led us there. We had the conversation of any NBA fans in the house. You watched the finals, right? You see Kevin Durant and Clay were injured, correct? Am I speaking to right? You get it. So I'm asking you. We all are under the impression that Kevin may not have been ready to go. Maybe the science wasn't there. Maybe the information wasn't there. But Kyle, I said to you, no matter what they would have said to him as a player, you would have went, right?
For sure.
So what do you do in that case? You present them the science, you say this is what we think. Marcus, anybody in that situation, it's more competitive, it's not the science, it's more of the heart of I just want to go for my team.
Yeah, I mean, you can't put it on the player to say no. It's got to come from somebody else. These guys. So the NBA Finals to me is kind of a watershed moment. You'd have two of the top probably 6 or 7 players in the league. Both go down during the finals. Both of them go down from compensation injuries. They have small injuries. They try to play through it. They rest a little bit, then they try to play through it. And now they both have career-threatening injuries. Neither of them, especially KD, may never be the same. And he's a generational talent, and that's a cultural loss. If you had this granular, I said we have data on half the league, and so most of the best players in the league we have data on. We don't have data on those two guys. If you had data on KD, if we know, so the type of data we collect, when we get done, we know everything about how they land, how they jump, how they slide, how they change direction. Every joint, we know what it's doing when they're performing at high levels. And so we could reassess him after he goes through practice, and we do this all the time, and we can say, KD, you've got 30% of the force coming from your left calf that you normally have. That's a huge risk. And on top of that, every time you land, now you've got twice as much force going through your right side. Those are huge risks. This is a giant risk for you to go out and play. And he might just say, give me the ball. We're going.
Right.
But at least he knows then, that there is a huge risk. As it was, I can almost guarantee, other than getting repeat MRIs, there was no objective data on the table. And what happens in those situations, they're so emotional. And I've been in these a whole lot. They're difficult situations to be in. All it is emotion. He wants to play. The coach wants him to play. The GM wants him to play. Everybody wants him to play. He may never be in this situation in his life again. And somebody has to say, look, there's no way you're going to make it if you have good data to show that. And if you have data to say that you're just at a really high risk, then you put that on the table too. And the objective data it blunts some of the emotion. It offsets some of the emotion.
Really? Do you believe that? And that's Kyle. They come to you. Here's the objective data, sir.
Yeah. I think what I watched play out with that situation was that everybody wanted to point the blame at someone. Whose fault was it? Was it Kevin's fault? Was it the doctor's fault? Was it the team's fault? Whose fault is it? And I think, I don't think it really does any good.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, like what Marcus was saying, you put it on the data. You put it on something that can hold this criticism and say, hey, I showed you what it was, and you get to choose. And so, but like I said, it's I think 99% of players in the NBA, if they love the game, they're gonna play. No matter what, there's that chance that they don't get hurt. And there's that chance that they win the championship. And so I think guys still take it, but knowledge is good. You should know what's going on in your body before you make these big decisions.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you know this because you watch us do it, but if we have all this granular data on how these guys move, it's a roadmap to put them back together.
Yeah.
We do this over and over and over in the NBA right now. Zach LaVine is one of the most athletic young players in the NBA, wins a dunk contest twice, under 24, tears his ACL. And before the Bulls bring him back, we have lots of data on Zach. Before the Bulls bring him back, they send him out for us to assess him. And he's moving amazingly well. I mean, at least from a raw force perspective. He's jumping higher than he did when he came in the league. It's mesmerizing. And everyone's like, he's ready, right? And that's what the Bulls see. He's ready. He's touching 2 inches higher than he ever has. And he was. But then we looked at the data, and he has huge compensation patterns. The things that made him at risk for an ACL injury before he got hurt are twice as bad as they were, and they had an injury. So this kid is not ready to come back. He's got a huge asymmetry they didn't used to have. And so the Bulls keep him out for another 5 weeks. They rehab him and work on these. I just talked to their high performance director just a couple weeks ago about this at the combine. So they worked on the things we gave him, and then we reassessed him, and now he's moving as well or better than he did before he had an ACL. The way they normally treat that is the same way they treat it if you guys have an ACL. You know, it's 90% as strong as contralateral leg. It doesn't say anything about how he moves. You know, you need more. This guy, he doesn't do this when he plays basketball. You know, he jumps like crazy. He does, you know, all these ridiculous athletic things. And so if you have all the data of him doing those athletic things, you just know it's apples and apples. And so we do this over and over and over in the NBA. And I actually, I mean, I think in the future, you guys are going to have access to this type of data. You know, you guys, you all have bodies. You've all been nicked at different times. Most of you probably have experienced at some point how something else might start hurting because you had that thing. You sprain an ankle, and now the knee starts hurting, or something along those lines. Most people that had old big injuries know that these new things that hurt them are based on these old injuries and compensation pattern. But you have no data to get you back on track. You just know that there's a problem there. And so this movement data, like, I'm 100% sure that it's going to make it into your lives really soon. Return to play for civilians, you know, not just for these best-in-class pro athletes.
Marcus, you talk about compensation. I'm really interested because you say it a lot. And I think that anybody who's been injured or any type of ailment, you compensate in other ways. And to me, that seems, when you say it, extremely obvious. But it's not so obvious when you're doing the data and you're testing. What have you found in terms of telling athletes about how they should not necessarily not compensate, but how they alleviate the compensation patterns that they're working on?
So this is when, you know, before we started collecting this data, I never would have guessed this, but a lot of times you'll have an injury. Athletes will have an injury. The injury will be completely gone, but they move like they're still hurting. You know, we see this frequently. There was a kid that was the top player in college player of the year a couple of years ago that we assessed right before training camp, and he looked like he was protecting his foot. Everything about his movements looked like he was protecting his foot, and it was putting his other knee at risk. He said he was perfectly healthy, had no injuries. And then we said, look, you know, this is how you perform relative to your peers. Before you go in the NBA, this is how you're going to match up against NBA players. But we're worried about your left knee. And then he tells us his knee has been hurting. He didn't share this, you know, until we said, we're worried about your left knee. And he says, well, my knee's been hurting. And then we find out that he's been shut down for the summer. You know, I didn't tell you, it was a guy you played with, actually. So before his rookie season, he's telling us that, you know, he's in the red line right now. The kid is freaking out. He's 2 weeks out from training camp, and he's shut down before his first NBA season. He has no idea why, and it's because he's playing away from an old plantar fasciitis injury on his other foot. Every time he lands, instead of his heels coming down to the ground and driving up, every time he lands, he keeps his heel up. You know, he leaves his heel off the ground like this because he doesn't want to load his plantar fascia. His fascia is perfect, but he had an injury when he was out trying to be the best player in college basketball, and he learned to play away from it. And so now he's completely healed, but he's doing something that's going to be career-limiting if he doesn't change it. So you'd think the body in all its wisdom would be able to correct these compensation patterns, but a lot of times they stay with you. Injury's gone, but now you're moving like you still, it served you to compensate at one point, but now you're moving like you still have that injury, and now it doesn't serve you. And those are some of the most compelling things that we do. Like I would have never guessed that they're as persistent as they are. But in those cases, a lot of times you just show the athlete this. Look, every time you land and you go up for a second jump, you keep your heel off the ground. And you come in with twice as much force across your left leg. And so then you give the athlete feedback when he does it again and again. And when he does it right, he knows how that feels. And you tell him when he does it right. And he can repeat that because athletes are really good at feeling things.
I would add to that, like, I spent a good lot of time in my life like trying to generate more muscle or more power outside of what my body naturally carried, right? I wasn't using what I had properly, but I was trying to get faster and jump higher using my body the wrong way. So once you learn how to use your body the right way, like your power goes up super fast, right? But most of us don't know how to use our bodies the right way. Like, how do you learn? How are you taught? I could have a coach tell me, like what Marcus was saying, you're favoring your right foot. I'm like, I don't think I am. And I just keep on moving. How do you know? But if you learn your body, this is like the biggest thing for me in the NBA is like, because I played on a bunch of teams and I played for a bunch of training staffs. And everyone has their own way, right? And so as I navigate team to team, like I try to somehow go with their staff and their way because that's how I get their best care. But I also have to know my own body. I have to know what I need. And I have to know how my body works. And I want to fix the things that I have that I can naturally do to increase my power more than I can just trying to, just squat more weight and add more weight to the dumbbell. And just as my knees caving in, I'm getting up more weight, but my knee is like just cratering, right? And so learning your own body it's hard to do unless you have the right help.
Yeah, in the front row. I'm just pointing.
You can't see those people?
Yeah, I'm blind. Blind. Do you have anything for vision?
Hello. Thank you so much. Great to have you and an amazing discussion. I'm a high school basketball coach for about 22 years, and I hear you about training and all this. But one of the things that I also do is I'm a drywall contractor. We have 1,000 carpenters in the country working, and they get hurt, obviously, right? So how can this get democratized enough where I can go out, see how we're hanging drywall, et cetera, get ahead of the injuries possibly, and do it in a way that I can't go to your place in Santa Barbara, obviously, but we'd like to maybe work with you. So this is a way to get it out to the people that are doing construction and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I said, these, the way I see it, if I project my life forward, I'd like to look back on my career and feel like we helped more than just these genetic lottery winners, right? We need to help facilitate that. I'm excited about that, but we're still at a stage where it takes so much resources that it's easier to invest it in the guys that are on $100 million contracts. The reality, though, is we're each given these different systems, and they have good things and they have bad things. And as you go along in life, some of the bad things get worse. Sometimes they get better. And if you had some feedback on those, then you can take action, right? I mean, to give you an idea of the predictive value, we assess every player in a partnership with the league now in the NBA. And so before every player goes in the league, we collect all this granular data on them. When they're out at the NBA Combine, when they're doing vertical jumps and bench press max and things like that. And there was a lot of closed door discussion about what we would do with the data. Do we give this data to the teams? Originally, that was the thought. We give it to the teams, and the teams can use that data to decide who they're going to draft, right? And we made the case that if you do that, it'll be used against some players. And so a kid who's a late lottery pick goes in the top of the second round, and his agent says, don't go do any of that bullshit P3 stuff. None of my guys are doing that. And then the whole program falls apart. And so what they do is they give the players the data. But we make predictions about who's going to get hurt before they ever step foot on an NBA court.
That's crazy.
And we share that with the commissioner. We share that with the bosses at the league. And even in the first year, it was incredibly predictive. We're just looking at how these guys move, where their asymmetries are, where their movement pathologies are, and we're stratifying the risk of getting hurt just based on how they move. And we had there were these dramatic injuries to top draft picks. In the first year we did this. And every injury was to a guy that we'd predicted that was in our red flag area and to the body part that we'd predicted. And I think that even the NBA who brought us in was surprised that it was so predictive. And I think they said they had an oh shit moment too. Where it's like, now we have all this information, what do we do with this? This is powerful, how do we get this out? Where does it go? So there's reasons for these things. There's physics behind why your body breaks, why it has advantages or disadvantages, and that applies to NBA players or to drywall workers or drywall contractors. So eventually you need that information. There's some of your guys that are at huge risk for back injury, and there's other guys that you can load them all day. It's never going to be an issue. Listen, that's just not how medicine is set up. Medicine is set up that you do what you like to do in life until something doesn't work anymore, and then you go see an orthopedist, and he says, don't play tennis anymore, you have no cartilage on the medial aspect of your left knee. But if you had that information...
Beforehand.
If you had that information when you still had cartilage, you have different outcomes.
Yeah.
And this, in the space we work in, this actually, it's basically high school physics over and over, too. It looks complex, but it really is not as complex as most of medicine. It's just that we don't do a great job in prevention in medicine, period, but especially in the musculoskeletal space.
Any questions for Kyle? No, not one for Kyle? All right,
there's a
yeah,
bunch.
right here. Was she
Man, you
sitting right
cannot
there?
see.
I
You
mean,
cannot
I'm blind. I see one right here.
With college sports being so competitive and important these days, have you worked with any of the teams like Stanford University or Notre Dame or any of those?
We have, a lot of the colleges have reached out. We started working with the Duke basketball team a couple of years ago,
That's not for Kyle.
and now we've just started engaging with some other college programs. Somebody say yay? Oh. Yeah, but listen, it's a great place to actually to do this work. These kids, the best athletes that go into college want to keep playing the sport. If they know they're going to go there, they're going to be cared for at a really high level, develop really well, and have a chance to keep playing. That's a big advantage. You also oftentimes, not in Kyle's sport, but in some of the sports, you get them for 3 or 4 years. So you can do a lot of work in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And if you have great roadmaps, you can take these kids a long way. So I'm excited about that, about colleges right now.
This guy here in the blue shirt, second row. Pooley, do you have a question?
A question for Kyle. 16 years in the NBA, which is fantastic. 3 children, married, multiple times traded. How do you balance your
Oh, boy.
personal family life and your
That's a good
children
question.
and moving from city to city 5, 6, 7 times in your career?
That's the hardest work. You know, I think, yeah, I hope, my hope for all this is that I take care of my body well enough that at some point I get to choose my family over the game.
Yeah.
Right? That'd be a great choice for me
Yeah.
someday. To not stop playing because my body broke, but because my kids are in this beautiful place and I want to have a great marriage. And yeah, the moving stinks, especially mid-season. It's really hard, especially on your wife, right? Like there's a lot of parts to playing in the NBA that, I mean, lots of it's really great, and lots of it's really challenging. And yeah, like I said, I got traded a couple days ago, and I don't know how this is going to work out all the way.
That's the first thing I go, so how's this Memphis situation happening? He's like, I don't know what to say about that.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure all the way, you know.
Yeah.
But I make better decisions when my body feels good. I'll tell you that.
Okay, all the ladies in the audience are like, oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Such a wonderful guy. There's a lady in the back I'd like to ask, and then Pooley, we'll go to you in the front here, second row at the end.
So I have like a 6-part question, but I'll
Uh-oh.
just try to get it down. I'd be curious, Marcus, what you see about the spread to, that NFL, as an example, is notoriously like, I just feel that this player is going to be great or not. I mean, the real applicability. Why did you start in basketball? Kind of what do you see, the progression to other pro sports? And then I'll just leave it there.
So I started actually in football. Right after I finished medical school, I started in football, working with the Patriots and then doing research for the NFL. And we had a good run there. But then I got interested in baseball, and then I was the first director of sports science in Major League Baseball, and then I got interested in basketball. I like solving problems. I like new problems. All these sports are different. All these sports are like these little micro universes in and of themselves. The NFL, the NBA is a much better place to work than the NFL. The NFL, they have this saying, next man up, right? And they turn it into a positive, but it also means last man down. If somebody gets hurt in the NFL, they generally get released pretty quickly. They got no guaranteed money. Only a few of the stars have guaranteed money. There was no guaranteed money before. In Kyle's sport, there's guys that are second guy off the bench that are on $50 or $60, $70 million contracts, all guaranteed. They invest a lot in their players. And so they're really serious about keeping these guys healthy. Your backup center gets hurt, it's hard to replace him. In the NFL, they've got the second string guy is probably really good. And the guy in the practice squad, he's probably really good too. There's a lot of athletes out there. But the guys that have like the combination of morphology, that have the skills, the basketball players are a little bit more rare. Basketball just seems like it's a better it's a better environment.
It's a
by
better
long way.
commissioner. There's a better situation. There's much more freedom. It's a better league.
Yes.
I know you're being politically
Yes.
correct, but it's
It
just a
is.
better place to be and work and
We're getting
thrive.
a lot of calls to get back in the NFL, and the only place I want to do it is on the player side. Not on the team
Exactly.
side. I don't want to. I want to. It's only in the players' corner because they need people in their corner in that sport.
That is a fact. Pooley, second row here with the blue shirt on. I ignored my friend. Sorry. You guys,
Got a
be
question
prepared.
for you. Got a question for you, man. Being like you said, you have to like stress your body. Like you want to push harder, like lift harder, do this. Knowing the things that you know about technology now and sports medicine and how it helps like differ. How do you balance in between still, performing at a high level, still getting these numbers up, and still taking care of your body? Like, it's like a rhythm with basketball. Everything is a rhythm. Like, you have to stay in this rhythm. You have to stay in this, constant mindset. But to switch something like that, like turn a switch, like, all right, I'm going to try something different. Can you relate, like, how that, like, cooperates with how you transition from basketball with, sports medicine and lifting still and to, like, get the numbers?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges that basketball presents is that we have a lot of skill work on the court. Like, we have to do a lot of court work every single day. Football, you just got to be big and strong and fast. Baseball, you hit some balls, you got to throw. Yeah, I'm not
Does
knocking
anybody
that
play
at all.
baseball?
I think the hardest thing to do in sports is to hit a baseball. Props, man.
Kyle's like,
But like,
football.
there's a lot of work in basketball, right? There's a lot of court time, a lot of running, a lot of jumping, a lot of hitting. And so I think one of the big challenges, and Marcus could speak to this, is to get basketball players to really buy into the weight room and to buy into, taking care of your body. Most guys don't do it until either they break or they're getting too old and it's like, I'm losing this thing. I got to start working right now. Like, to me, it's like, this is all like lifestyle, right? Like how I care for my body. Like we talked, someone said mind, body, spirit. Like, it's all connected, right? And it's like, there's these boundaries that I give myself in life that, like, I want to stay within these, and then I like to work hard, right? I like to live hard, like to love hard, but like I got to create these boundaries for myself. Like, and some of the boundaries are what I eat, and some of the boundaries are how I sleep, and some of the boundaries are how I spend my time. But there's like this kind of sweet spot that we're always kind of searching for, where they all kind of fit in. It's like this lifestyle, right? It's not a diet. It's not a, whatever it is. It's just like this like healthy balance of like, sports training, for a long time it was like you just lifted as much weight as possible, and that was how you trained. And then it got kind of too far on the other side, where everything was done on these balancing pads, and like I didn't feel like I lifted any weight, and I wasn't getting stronger. And I'm a body type that can't just maintain like just by doing 3 sets of 10 twice a week. I have to like really lift, right? But I also got to balance that with my court work. And so it's hard. But these are good jobs, like I was saying earlier. Like it's worth it, right?
So it's more subjective? Is it more for each individual when they find that sweet spot? 'Cause
Totally.
it's not a recipe. It depends on who the person
To me, you really got to know your body first. You got to know what you need. Different guys need different things.
Sure.
And there's different times where I need more court work than I might need weight room. I only got so much time in a day. Like I told my coach this year, I was like, I'm 38. I got 2.5 hours for you today. You let me know what you want me to do. I'll do whatever it is, but this is all I got. I'm going to work really hard for this 2.5 hours this morning.
Right.
But like you got to figure out what it is that you need. But it's all got to be within the lifestyle. It can't just be like, I'm going to go down this road really hard for like right now, and then I'm going to go back this way. You just wear yourself out, and you're not balanced. And so that's what I would say to that.
We have a little less than 5 minutes. I want to try to get as many questions as possible in that back row there. Blue denim shirt, and then there's a guy next to him and next to him.
Marcus, Kyle, thank you so much for the presentation. Good to see you guys again. My question is actually really related to when you were talking about compensatory behaviors that the athlete might do when they've had an injury, and just everything that we've been talking about. For me, I'm a clinical psychologist. So much of it starts with the mind, and I'm wondering, how do you see this integrating with behavioral health, sports psychologists, to really help keep that balance in what you're doing in both your body, your mind, and your spirit, as you said?
Oh, man. It's easier if we deal with biomechanics only. You know? It's like, just keep it at the math level. I mean, Kyle was just touching on it too. It's like the whole system matters. You know, you cannot separate one from the other. I mean, these compensation injuries, I mean, are they happening because the body isn't working? No, they're happening because the brain is saying, let's not do that thing like we used to do it. We're going to do it differently.
Yep.
So, I mean, having this integration is certainly the way forward. How does that happen? You know, it's different for every athlete. We have lots of guys that you can just see are scared to use their body. Even when their body is perfect, they're scared. And you have to show it to them. You have to do aggressive things with them and let them start seeing that their body can actually do what it's supposed to do. This, I would say, you know, for you guys too, like a lot of athletes in their careers, not with the, like, you know, hopefully KD comes back and he's every bit what he was before. You know, that'd be good for everyone. But those type of dramatic injuries are usually not what end careers. Usually what end careers are death by 1,000 cuts. You know, you injure something, it doesn't completely heal, you compensate a little bit, injure something else, and slowly your body just doesn't work as well as it used to. And you guys, I mean, it's the same for you guys not trying to play professional sports. Like these small injuries, compensation, doing something different, now that hurts. Those are what undo bodies. It's not just that you're not recovering as quickly, you know, that you don't have a big anabolic response. It's these death by 1,000 cuts. And to the extent that you can undo some of those, you can get insight into these compensation injuries, you'll be doing yourself a big favor.
We got 2 minutes left, so we'll give it to you.
I'll do a question. You can answer it quickly. Just as a fan of all sports, it just seems like there's more and more injuries, at least that I remember kind of 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and there's more bad injuries. So just from the data, number one, is that true? Are there more injuries than there were 10 or 15 years ago, and are there more bad injuries than there were? And is there something that athletes are doing differently than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to get themselves more injured seriously?
Yeah, it depends on the sport. So, I mean, you know about injuries now a little quicker, just like you know about everything else that doesn't work out well that might be easy to sell through media, you know, that might grab some eyeballs. You know about bad things that happen in the world right away, too. In Kyle's sport, the sport has gotten really, really fast. It is crazy ballistic now. You know, that game used to be, you know, they played it rough, but it was not played like it's played now.
Fact.
You know, opening bell to closing. It's a different game. So injuries have gone up in that sport, but not in all the sports. You know, in the NFL, I don't think they've gone up. They have. I think it's been pretty steady. You just hear about them more. So I think that's in general. It's more about the information being relayed.
Big data, biomechanics, the new science behind personalized training. They're giving me the wrap. Do you want to add something else before we get out of here?
No, but we can talk about that some more if you want.
We'll hang out and
and
talk to you guys.
anything else too.
Yeah. Marcus and Kyle, were they not amazing?